Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Anne and today I'm giving you a bit of a belated March wrap-up. At the start of the month I was planning on filming another wrap-up on the go, so filming my reviews of the books I've read during the month right as I've finished the books and then editing them into a bit more of a dynamic wrap-up video. But pretty soon in the month March kind of derailed a bit. I filmed the first clip for the wrap-up and then after that life just happened. We had some construction done in our street, so that meant that for a couple of weeks we had a lot of noise during the day, so that meant that I wasn't able to film. And then about 2 weeks into March, very sadly and very suddenly, my guinea pig Ziggy passed away. He was fine one day, it seemed, and then the next day we came into the living room to find him having trouble breathing and just being in a lot of pain and discomfort, and we went to the vet and we got antibiotics for him, but by the end of the day he was done. He found a quiet corner, and he passed away. So that really put me in no mood to film, which is also why there haven't been that many videos this month. And then at the end of the month my other guinea pig, Lily, suddenly got very ill and we really thought we were going to lose her too, but she pulled through and she's better than ever, it seems now. So that's wonderful, but it was a bit of a roller coaster of a month is what I'm trying to say. And I'm now also seeing that my battery is almost empty, so we're going to make this a quick video, which is what I was planning on doing anyway, because I kind of want to keep my reviews for these books short. I managed to read 8 books in March, all the books that I had planned to read for Tis the Damn Readathon, which is the Taylor Swift readathon I was participating in March. You can find my TBR video up above, but I am going to be reviewing all the books I mentioned in there now. But like I said, I want to keep these reviews about a minute long. I'm just going to quickly tell you what I thought of the books, give you my star rating, and then move on. I didn't really prepare for this video either, so I'm not sure what I'm going to have to say on these books anyway. This is already a chaotic video, let's just get into the reviews. The first book I read in March was He Forgot to Say Goodbye by Benjamin Alira Sanz. For the readathon I read this for Fearless, Taylor Swift's second album, and that was for the prompt to read a YA novel, I think for the song 15. I ended up giving this 4 stars, which is the lowest rating I've ever given a Benjamin Alira Sanz book because he's one of my favorite authors. I think I've read 3 books by them now and I gave all of them 5 stars. But this one, while still being very good, I just connected with a little bit less. It's about 2 boys who both don't have a relationship with their father because he left early on in their lives, and that's something they both struggle with. And these 2 boys, who are from very different walks of life, I guess you could say, kind of meet and form a bit of a bond. That's basically the premise of the book, and I enjoyed it. I thought, as always, it was very well written, but I had hoped these boys would get together a bit sooner, that you could really see their friendship develop, but that's not really the case. Yeah, my battery is now flashing at me, so I think I'm going to have to come back and film this a little bit later. Damn it. Okay, I'm back. Anyway, where was I? He Forgot to Say Goodbye, great book, but if you want to start reading Benjamin Alira Sanz's books because you've heard good things about his young adult contemporary novels, I should say that this is a young adult contemporary novel, as are all his books, I believe. I wouldn't recommend starting with this one. I'd recommend starting with Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, or I always forget the title. The Inexplicable Logic of My Life, which is really wonderful as well. The next book I finished in March was not this entire thing, but The Sign of the Four by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which is the second novel in the Sherlock Holmes mystery series adventures things. I gave it 2 stars. I wasn't too fond of it. I always enjoy reading about Sherlock and Watson, and I've been on a bit of a Sherlock kick lately because I've started rewatching Elementary, which is a great series. I love Lucy Lewis-Joan Watson. She's the best Watson, you can fight me on that, but I'm right. But The Sign of the Four was not very good. It's very dated, it had some racism issues, and the story itself was a bit dull. I think it's definitely not the best one out of the Sherlock Holmes stories. If you're hearing a lot of noise, by the way, I think my neighbors are moving stuff or something, but it's very loud. But yeah, The Sign of the Four, I wouldn't really recommend it. It just wasn't very exciting and I don't really have that much to say about it other than that I read this for the album Evermore, for Tis the Damn Readathon, for Nobody No Crime, to read a mystery or thriller. The next book I finished in March was Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor, which is the first book in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. I read this for the read-along that some other YouTubers are hosting in March, April and May for these 3 books. I'll leave the link to the announcement video down below. I'm not sure who's hosting it, and there are a bunch of people. I think Gabby from Books and Nerd Things, or Books and Other Nerd Things, and Kira from the Book Bella. And I watched the live stream at the end of the month as well, and it was just a lot of fun to read this, and it was a great incentive to read this book because it's been on my TBR for quite a while, but now I finally got to read it. It is a fantasy novel about Karoo, but it starts in the real world, which I was really surprised by. I didn't really know that much about this story going in. And I really wasn't expecting all that much. I thought it might be a 3-star read at best, but I ended up giving this book 4 stars. It's a bit of an older fantasy novel. I think it's from 2011, maybe 2012, I'm not entirely sure. And usually when I read books from back then, as if that's an old book, but in terms of YA fantasy it's a bit older, they usually don't really impress me, but this one really did. The story was great, the world building was great, the reveals were amazing, I was blown away, and I'm just really invested, which doesn't really happen to me all that often anymore with older YA fantasy, but I'm very invested in the story and I can't wait to read the second book, which I'll be doing in April. Oh, and I read this for the album Red, for Red on the cover. The next book I finished was Maybe This Time by Jill Mansell. Jill Mansell used to be one of my favorite authors when I was about 16, 17. I read a lot of her books and I still enjoy them, but this one was a disappointment, unfortunately, and I ended up giving it 2 stars. It really just didn't work for me. It felt as if Jill Mansell thought, oh shit, I have to put out another book, let me put together some of the tropes I've used in previous books, see what comes out, and then write it really quickly. It felt rushed, it didn't feel like it was well thought through. I didn't like the characters, they were a lot more flat than in her other books, I think. I just wasn't that invested, and if I wasn't reading this for the Buzzwordathon and for this the Damn Readathon for Lover, I think I might have DNF'd it because I just got a bit grumpy while I was reading this. I really wasn't into the romance either, it felt a bit forced, and I usually really love her books, so I'm just gonna take this one as a fluke because I've got another one of her books on my shelves and just forget about it. The next book I finished was an audiobook which I listened to for the album Speak Now, and it was City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab, or V.E. Schwab. And I wasn't really expecting too much from this book because I didn't really know that much about it going in. I've read a bunch of V.E. Schwab's other books and really enjoyed them, but this is a middle grade novel and I wasn't really sure what to expect from her writing in a middle grade novel, but this ended up being my favorite book of the month. I gave it 5 stars and I really enjoyed it. It's about a young girl called Cassidy Blake who, because of a near-death experience, is able to kind of see ghosts and cross over to the ghost world, I guess you could say. And she also has a ghost best friend, and her parents are authors of paranormal books, or books about the paranormal, even though they can't see ghosts, and I don't think they truly believe in it themselves. But because of her parents' job, they moved to Edinburgh for a few weeks to film a TV show about ghosts, and when they get there, things happen, shit goes down, and it's just a really fun story. I really enjoyed it a lot. It was great to listen to it on audio, it was very exciting. I really cared for Cassidy and Jacob and the other characters, and I can't wait to read the second book because this is the first book in a trilogy. Then the next book I finished was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, which I read for folklore, to read a book that's about mythology or a retelling, and this is a retelling of Greek mythology, of the story of Achilles and Patroclus. It's told through the eyes of Patroclus, and it basically tells the story of how he and Achilles met, how they fell in love, and what went down in the Trojan War. I was expecting to really love this because I gave Madeline Miller's other book, Circe, 5 stars. I completely fell in love with that one. I expected the same to happen to this one, but the only reason why I gave it 4 stars, because I gave it 4 stars, is because of the writing. If it wasn't for the writing, I think it would have been a 3-star read for me, because I just wasn't that invested in the story. I've read it a couple of times now in different ways, and I think there's just something about the story of the Trojan War that just doesn't really appeal to me and just doesn't really speak to me. But the writing in this is absolutely amazing. I think Madeline Miller is one of the most gifted writers writing today. Her descriptions are amazing. There's a melodic quality to her writing. It flows absolutely beautifully. I read big chunks of it physically, but I also listened to the audiobook in other parts, and that was wonderful because you could hear the writing. We're down to the last 2 books, and the first one of those is Giovannis Room by James Baldwin. I read this for the album Reputation, and I was expecting to really love this because I don't think I've seen a single bad review for this book in my life, at least not a bad review that isn't also homophobic. I just didn't really connect with it. I didn't really enjoy it. I ended up giving it 2 stars. I really appreciate what this book has meant for gay literature, what it still means for gay literature, how revolutionary this book was in its time. But reading it now, I didn't like the characters. I didn't really connect with the writing, which is something I was very surprised by because I've always heard that James Baldwin is an amazing writer and I really expected to love his writing as well. But there was just something about it that kept dragging me out of the story. It just wasn't really for me. And I also thought it was a bit melodramatic and maybe I just wasn't in the mood for it. I definitely wasn't in the mood for it. But I don't think I would have rated it much higher if I'd read it at a different time. I do still want to read some of James Baldwin's other work though. I definitely want to read some of his non-fiction. I'm just very interested in him as a person, as a writer, as a thinker. So I definitely don't want to write him off based on this book. But this one just wasn't really for me. And then the last book I finished in March was The Penelope Ad by Margaret Atwood. I read this for the album 1989 for Bad Blood. The prompt for that was to read a book about a morally grey character. And this tells the story of Penelope, Odysseus' wife, and she's in the afterlife and she tells the story of what happened to her while Odysseus was away for the Trojan War and afterwards the Odyssey. It's basically her take on the story and it's interspersed with a chorus of the 12 maids that were murdered when Odysseus came back to his home and saw everything that went down there. They were basically innocent maids, but Odysseus killed them all. And this is also their story. I ended up giving this 3 stars because even though I really liked the premise, I think it could have been more than it was. Penelope's story didn't really feel very new, it didn't feel very exciting or like it really added something to the story. The only part that I really enjoyed were the parts by the 12 maids. That was the exciting part of the story for me, hearing their side of it. And it was also written in more interesting formats. There's a part of it written kind of as a play, there are poems, there is a lecture that they're giving. That was very exciting, but Penelope's story itself, which is the main chunk of the book, wasn't all that exciting to me. And that's it for my March wrap up, just a few quick reviews of the 8 books that I read. It was a weird month, but reading definitely made it a bit better. So down in the comments, please tell me about the books you read in March, or maybe you've read some of the books that I talked about today and give me your opinion on them. And please like this video if you liked it and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of me in the future. And have a wonderful day. Bye!